The Lagos heat clung to Adana Okafor's skin as she stepped out of the taxi, rolling her carry-on suitcase behind her. The familiar sounds of her neighborhood in suburban Accra welcomed her home, children playing in the distance, the hum of a neighbor's generator, birds calling from the massive acacia tree that shaded their driveway. As a black African woman who had climbed the corporate ladder to become one of the youngest vice presidents at Pan-African Investment Bank, Adana was accustomed to frequent business trips, but this one to Nigeria had concluded 3 days earlier than expected. "Thank you," she said to the driver, handing him Ghanaian cedis with a generous tip. Her dark eyes, framed by elegantly arched brows, surveyed her 2-story home with its warm terracotta exterior and wraparound veranda, a sanctuary she and Olufemi had built together over their 8 years of marriage. Adana hadn't called ahead. After the exhausting negotiations with reluctant investors in Lagos, she'd wanted to surprise Olufemi, her husband of nearly a decade. A black African man of impressive intellect and gentle demeanor, Olufemi Okafor was a respected professor of economic history at the University of Ghana, specializing in pre-colonial trade networks across West Africa. Their relationship had always been built on mutual respect, shared ambitions, and the deep cultural bonds of their Nigerian heritage, despite having made Ghana their home. The mid-afternoon sun beat down as Adana punched in the security code and pushed open the ornate wooden gate. The front garden, lush with hibiscus and bougainvillea, welcomed her with bursts of color and sweet fragrance. Something felt different though. Olufemi's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for a Tuesday afternoon when he typically taught back-to-back lectures. "Perhaps he's come down with something," she murmured to herself, concern creasing her brow as she fished for her house keys. The familiar weight of her handbag on one shoulder and the rhythmic clicking of her heels against the stone pathway steadied her as fatigue from the journey settled into her bones. All she wanted was a cool shower, a glass of palm wine, and the comfort of her husband's embrace, not necessarily in that order. The house was unusually quiet when she entered. No CNN International broadcasting from their living room television as was Olufemi's habit, no jazz music drifting from his study. Adana placed her handbag on the console table in the foyer, next to a family photograph taken at her father's 70th birthday celebration in their ancestral village near Enugu. The image captured the essence of their tight-knit family, Adana's parents, her 3 brothers with their wives and children, and Olufemi, whose broad smile and arm wrapped protectively around Adana's waist spoke volumes of his integration into the Igbo family despite his Yoruba background. "Olufemi," she called out, her melodic voice carrying through the high-ceilinged entryway. "I'm home early, darling." No response came. Strange. His car was here, and Tuesday's their housekeeper, Fumni, an elderly black African woman who had become like family, had off. Adana slipped off her blazer, draping it over her arm as she moved deeper into the house. The living room was pristine, just as she'd left it 5 days ago, West African art adorning the walls, family photographs arranged carefully on shelves, academic tomes and literary classics filling their built-in bookcases. Adana was about to call out again when she heard it, voices. Muffled, coming from upstairs. Olufemi's deep baritone was unmistakable, but there was another voice too. A woman's. Young. Laughing softly. Her heart rate quickened, but Adana forced herself to remain calm. "Don't jump to conclusions," she whispered to herself, a mantra she often repeated in tense business negotiations. There could be a perfectly reasonable explanation. Olufemi mentored many students, both male and female. Perhaps this was an advising meeting that couldn't wait. But why meet at home? And upstairs? Silently, she placed her blazer on the arm of their sofa and moved toward the staircase, her natural instinct for discretion overriding the impulse to announce herself again. The voices grew clearer as she ascended, careful to avoid the third step that always creaked. They were coming from Olufemi's home office. Would mean everything to her, Olufemi was saying, his voice warm with emotion in a way that made Adana's stomach tighten. "You have no idea how grateful I am for your help with this. It's my honor, Professor Okafor, the female voice replied. After everything you've done for me, this is the least I can do. She's going to be so moved. Adana paused on the landing, her hand gripping the polished wooden banister. The door to Olufemi's study was partially open, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. She inched closer, her heart hammering so loudly she feared they might hear it. Through the crack in the door, she could see Olufemi standing near his desk, his tall frame bent slightly as he examined something spread out before him. Beside him stood a young woman, no more than 22 or 23, with closely cropped natural hair and elegant features that marked her as unmistakably black African, likely from West Africa by her accent. She wore the distinctive green and white colors of the University of Ghana, a simple blouse and pencil skirt that nonetheless accentuated her youthful figure. They were standing close, too close for Adana's comfort, their shoulders nearly touching as they huddled over whatever lay on the desk. Olufemi's face was animated in a way Adana rarely saw outside of their most intimate moments, his expressive hands gesturing as he spoke about something that clearly stirred his passion. This photograph, he was saying, pointing to something Adana couldn't see, this is the one I think we should use as the centerpiece. Captured during her graduation from LSE. The young woman nodded enthusiastically. It shows her determination. The confidence in her eyes. She leaned closer to Olufemi, their heads now just inches apart. You've told me so much about her journey, how she overcame so many obstacles. This image encapsulates that spirit. Olufemi's gaze lingered on the young woman's face a moment too long before he nodded in agreement. Precisely. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. Chinyu, you truly understand what I'm trying to accomplish here. Not everyone would. The young woman, Chinyu, smiled up at him, admiration plain on her face. You speak about her with such love, Professor. It's impossible not to be moved. Adana felt as though she'd been doused in ice water. They were clearly discussing her. The photograph from her London School of Economics graduation was one of Olufemi's favorites, but the intimacy between them felt like a violation. The way this young woman, this Chinyu, spoke about her, as if she knew Adana through Olufemi's stories, it felt intrusive, uncomfortable. And why was Olufemi sharing such personal details with a student? Why were they meeting in their home, in his private study, when his office on campus would have been more appropriate? Before she could process these thoughts, Olufemi placed his hand on Chinyu's shoulder, squeezing gently. I couldn't do this without you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Your insight, your creativity, you've made this more special than I could have imagined. Chinyu's hand moved to cover his, a gesture of reassurance that seemed too familiar. We still have much to do before she returns on Friday. The materials for the display boards should arrive tomorrow, and I've confirmed with the other students that they'll help with assembly on Thursday. You're extraordinary, Olufemi said softly. I knew from the moment you spoke up in my economic history seminar that you were different from the others. Your perspective, your passion for our shared heritage. Adana stepped back, unable to watch any more. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her as she retreated down the hallway toward their bedroom, careful to make no sound. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she'd just witnessed. Was Olufemi having an affair with this student? The evidence wasn't definitive, they hadn't embraced or kissed, but the emotional intimacy was undeniable. And they were clearly planning something to coincide with her expected return on Friday. A surprise of some sort, involving display boards and other students. Perhaps an academic exhibition? But why keep it secret? And why did it require such personal closeness? Inside their bedroom, Adana sank onto the edge of their king-sized bed, her fingers digging into the handwoven Kent cloth bedspread they'd purchased on their honeymoon in Kumasi. The room surrounded her with memories, their wedding portrait on the dresser, showcasing them in traditional Nigerian attire, the painting of the Lagos coastline they'd bought on their first anniversary, the collection of carved wooden sculptures from various African nations they'd visited together. Tears threatened, but Adana blinked them back fiercely. She was not a woman who jumped to conclusions or acted on emotion alone. As the daughter of a black African businessman who had built a shipping empire from nothing, and as a black African woman who had to work twice as hard to be recognized in the male-dominated world of international finance, she had learned to observe carefully, gather information, and act strategically. She checked her watch, almost 4 o'clock. If she confronted them now, she might not get the full truth. Better to retreat, regroup, and return when she had composed herself and considered all possibilities. With practiced quiet, Adana collected her handbag and blazer from downstairs, slipped back outside, and called another taxi using her phone. 20 minutes later, she was checking into the Kempinski Hotel Gold Coast City, a luxurious establishment where she often hosted international clients. Just for tonight, she told the receptionist, a young black African woman with immaculately braided hair who recognized Adana from previous business functions. "I'm surprising my husband tomorrow and need somewhere to stay." The half-truth felt bitter on her tongue, but Adana maintained her professional smile until she reached the privacy of her suite. Only then did she allow the facade to crack, sinking into an armchair as the air conditioning chilled the tears on her cheeks. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Olufemi, "Missing you terribly. 3 more days feel like an eternity. Can we video call tonight?" Adana stared at the message, her husband's words now carrying possible double meanings she had never before considered. In 8 years of marriage, she had never once doubted Olufemi's fidelity or his love. He had been her rock, her confidant, her biggest supporter as she climbed the corporate ladder. They had weathered the disappointment of not yet having children, the stress of dual high-powered careers, and the complexities of merging their different Nigerian tribal traditions into a cohesive shared identity in their adopted Ghanaian home. Could she have been blind to changes in their relationship? Had his academic mentorship of this young woman, Chinyu, evolved into something inappropriate? Or was there truly an innocent explanation for the scene she had witnessed? As the Accra skyline began to glow with the approaching sunset, Adana made a decision. She would not confront Olufemi immediately. Tomorrow, she would begin discreetly investigating what was happening in her absence. Only when she had more information would she decide how to proceed. She texted back, "Missing you too. Very busy with negotiations. Might be too late to call tonight, but I'll try. Love you." Each word felt like a small betrayal, but Adana needed time. Time to understand, time to process, time to prepare for whatever truth awaited her. As a black African woman who had navigated the complex politics of international finance, she knew that rushing in without adequate information was always a mistake. Outside her hotel window, the lights of Accra twinkled like the stars that had guided her ancestors across savanna and forest for generations. Adana drew strength from the resilience encoded in her DNA, from countless black African women before her who had faced uncertainty with dignity and courage. Whatever was happening with Olufemi and this student, Adana Okafor would face it with the same determination that had carried her from a small village in Nigeria to the boardrooms of Pan-African Investment Bank. The truth, whatever it might be, would not destroy her. She would find it, confront it, and decide her path forward, on her own terms. The morning light filtered through the hotel curtains as Adana awoke, momentarily disoriented before remembering yesterday's discovery. She checked her phone, 3 missed calls from Olufemi and a text, "Hope negotiations are going well. Love you." Her stomach tightened as she replied with a believable excuse about late meetings and poor reception. 8 years of marriage and deception had never been part of their relationship. Until now, on both sides, perhaps. After a quick breakfast, Adana called her assistant to arrange remote work for the day, citing personal matters. Then she phoned the one person she could trust completely. "Adana. What brings you to call so early?" Folake Adeyemi's rich voice came through the speaker. A fellow black African woman who had been Adana's roommate at university, Folklore was now a respected psychologist with a private practice in Accra. "I need your perspective," Adana said, keeping her voice steady. "Can we meet for lunch?" 2 hours later, they sat in a secluded corner of an upscale restaurant in OSU, where business executives often conducted discreet meetings. Folklare's concerned eyes studied Adana's face as she recounted what she had witnessed. "Before you jump to conclusions," Folklore cautioned, her gold earrings catching the light as she leaned forward, "consider all possibilities. Olufemi has never given you reason to doubt him before." "That's what makes this so difficult," Adana admitted, absent-mindedly stirring her untouched jollof rice. "The Olufemi I know would never betray our marriage. But what I saw was ambiguous," Folklore finished. "Close but not conclusive. And they were discussing some sort of surprise for you." Adana nodded, her throat tight. "I need to know more before confronting him." After lunch, Adana drove to the university, parking her car where it wouldn't be immediately visible from the history department. She felt ridiculous, like a character in one of those American films where jealous spouses conducted amateur investigations. Yet here she was, a highly educated black African woman with an MBA from London School of Economics, hiding behind sunglasses to spy on her husband. The campus buzzed with between-class activity, students hurrying across manicured lawns. Adana blended in easily, her professional attire similar to what many professors wore. She located Olufemi's lecture hall from memory and slipped into the back just as his economic history of West Africa class was ending. Olufemi stood at the podium, tall and commanding in his navy blue suit, gesturing animatedly as he made final points about trans-Saharan trade routes. His passion for African history had been one of the things that attracted Adana when they'd met at a university fundraiser. As students gathered their belongings, Adana spotted her, Chinyu, in the front row. The young woman approached Olufemi after other students had filed out, her body language respectful but familiar. They spoke briefly, Olufemi checking his watch before nodding. Chinyu smiled and departed, not noticing Adana who had ducked behind a tall student. Adana followed at a distance as Chinyu walked to the student center, joining 3 other black African students, 2 women and 1 man. They huddled together, speaking intently over open notebooks. One pulled out a laptop, showing something to the others. Curiosity overcoming caution, Adana approached their table, pretending to look for someone. She caught fragments of their conversation. "Foundation launch needs to be perfect. Professor Okafor wants the scholarship announcement to be the highlight. Can't believe we're keeping this from his wife until Friday. Foundation? Scholarship?" The pieces weren't fitting together in a way that suggested infidelity, but rather some kind of academic or philanthropic initiative. Adana retreated, more confused than before. Back in her hotel room, she accessed their joint account online. Sure enough, there had been several large transfers in recent months to something called Okafor Education Initiative. Olufemi had mentioned wanting to start a foundation someday, but they'd agreed to wait until their financial position was more secure. Her phone rang. Olufemi. Taking a deep breath, she answered. "Hello, darling," she said, striving for normalcy. Adana, his voice warmed at hearing her. "How are the negotiations?" "Challenging," she replied truthfully. "How are your classes this week?" "The usual. Though I've been working on a special project with some students." He paused. "I can't wait to see you Friday. I have something important to show you." "Oh?" she prompted, heart racing. "It's a surprise," he said, his excitement palpable even through the phone. "Something I've been planning for months. I hope, it will make you proud." After they hung up, Adana stared at the ceiling, torn between relief and lingering doubt. The evidence pointed to a surprise related to education, likely the foundation those students had mentioned, not an affair. But why the secrecy? Why meet at their home? And why the emotional intimacy she'd witnessed between Olufemi and Chinyu? Tomorrow, she decided, she would return home unannounced and confront her husband directly. Their marriage had always been built on honesty and communication. If Olufemi was planning something special for her, she would apologize for her suspicions. And if there was more to his relationship with Chinyu than academic mentorship. Adana pushed the thought away. One more day of investigation, and then she would face whatever truth awaited her, with the dignity and strength that had carried her ancestors through centuries of challenges, and that ran deep in her blood as a proud black African woman. Morning light streamed through the hotel windows as Adana prepared herself for the day ahead. She dressed with particular care, selecting a bold purple Ankara print dress that always made her feel powerful. Today, she would need that confidence as she uncovered the full truth behind Olufemi's secretive behavior. After checking out of the hotel, Adana drove to their neighborhood but parked a block away from their home. It was just after 9, Olufemi would typically be teaching his morning seminar at this hour. She waited in her car, reviewing emails on her phone while occasionally glancing toward their street. At 9:30, her patience was rewarded when she spotted Olufemi's silver sedan pulling out of their driveway. Adana followed at a safe distance, surprised when instead of heading toward the university, Olufemi drove to an office building in East Legon, an upscale business district. She watched him park and enter the building, then waited 15 minutes before following. The directory in the lobby listed several businesses, including a law firm, an accounting office, and on the third floor, Okafor Education Initiative. Seeing the name confirmed in physical space made Adana's heart race. This was real, not just transfers in their bank account but an actual organization with an office. She took the elevator to the third floor and found a modest suite with frosted glass doors bearing the initiative's name in elegant lettering. Through the glass, she could make out several people moving about inside. Gathering her courage, Adana pushed open the door. A young black African woman seated at the reception desk looked up with a professional smile. "Good morning, how may I help you?" Before Adana could respond, a door opened and Olufemi emerged, deep in conversation with an elderly black African man in traditional Ghanaian Kent cloth. They both froze upon seeing her. "Adana," Olufemi said, shock evident in his voice. "You're back early." "Yes," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I finished in Lagos sooner than expected." An awkward silence descended until the elderly man cleared his throat. "So this is the famous Adana I've heard so much about." He stepped forward, extending his hand. "I am Chief Kwesi Mensah. Your husband has spoken of you with great admiration." Adana shook his hand automatically, her mind racing to process this new development. Chief Mensah was a well-known philanthropist and elder statesman in Ghana. "It seems I've arrived at an inopportune moment," Chief Mensah continued, glancing between them. "Perhaps we should reschedule our meeting, Professor Okafor?" Olufemi seemed to recover his composure. "That might be best, Chief. Thank you for your understanding." After the chief departed, Olufemi guided Adana into his office and closed the door. The room was modest but tastefully furnished, with framed photographs of educational projects across West Africa adorning the walls. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," he said softly. "I wanted everything to be perfect for the surprise." "What exactly is this, Olufemi?" Adana gestured around them. "And why all the secrecy?" Olufemi sighed, moving to stand beside his desk. "It's meant to be a gift, for our anniversary and to honor your father." He picked up a framed photograph she hadn't noticed. "The Samuel Okafor Scholarship Fund for Young African Scholars." Adana's throat tightened as she recognized the picture, her father at his university graduation, the first in his family to earn a degree. "My father? But why not tell me?" "Because you would have wanted to be involved," Olufemi explained, his eyes earnest. "And you would have insisted on contributing financially. I wanted this to be my gift to both of you, recognizing the educational legacy your father created that made your success possible. As he spoke, pieces began falling into place, the meetings with Chinyu and other students, the financial transfers, the secretive planning sessions. But something still bothered her. And Chinyu? The student I saw you with at our house? What is her role in this? A flash of understanding crossed Olufemi's face. Ah, now I see. You came home early yesterday, didn't you? And saw us in my study. Adana nodded, watching his reaction carefully. Chinyu is our first scholarship recipient, Olufemi explained. She comes from the same village near Enugu as your father. When I discovered this connection in my economic history class, it seemed like fate. She's been helping coordinate the other students who will benefit from the scholarship program. She seemed very close to you, Adana said carefully. Olufemi's brow furrowed, then cleared as understanding dawned. You thought, he broke off, shaking his head. Adana, no. Chinyu reminds me of you when we first met, brilliant, determined, ambitious. She sees me as a mentor, nothing more. Just then, the door opened and Chinyu herself entered, carrying a stack of documents. She stopped short upon seeing Adana. Mrs. Okafor. You're back early. Her expression shifted from surprise to dismay. Oh no, the surprise is ruined. Not entirely, Olufemi said, moving to stand beside Adana. I was just explaining the scholarship foundation to my wife. Chinyu approached, extending her hand to Adana. It's an honor to finally meet you properly, Mrs. Okafor. Your husband speaks of you with such pride. She handed Adana a folder. These are the profiles of all 5 inaugural scholarship recipients, including myself. We're all first-generation university students from rural villages, following the path your father blazed. Adana opened the folder, emotion welling as she saw the faces of 5 young black African students, their biographies detailing challenges overcome and aspirations for the future. The last page contained the Foundation's mission statement, which began, in honor of Samuel Okafor, who believed education was the greatest inheritance he could give his children. Tears blurred Adana's vision as the full scope of what Olufemi had created became clear. This wasn't just a scholarship, it was a living testament to her father's legacy. When you came to the house yesterday, Chinyu continued, unaware of Adana's earlier suspicions, we were finalizing the display boards for Friday's launch ceremony. Your husband wanted everything to be perfect for your anniversary surprise. Adana looked at Olufemi, her heart full of love and regret for having doubted him. 10 years, she said softly. I almost forgot our anniversary was approaching. How could you remember, with all your responsibilities? Olufemi smiled, taking her hand. But I remembered for both of us. As they stood together in the office that represented Olufemi's tribute to her family, Adana felt a wave of gratitude for this man who understood what would truly move her, not jewelry or vacations, but honoring the educational values that had shaped her life. I need to show you everything, Olufemi said, his excitement returning. The scholarship structure, the mentorship program, the community development initiatives. And the surprise party Friday evening, Chinyu added, then clapped a hand over her mouth. Oh. I wasn't supposed to mention that part. Olufemi laughed. Since the surprise is revealed, you might as well know all of it. Your parents are flying in tomorrow. Your brothers too. We're having a proper celebration to launch the foundation. Adana embraced her husband, burying her face against his chest to hide her tears. How close she had come to confronting him with accusations based on misunderstandings and incomplete information. How nearly she had tarnished what should have been a beautiful moment with suspicion. I love you, she whispered. And I'm sorry I doubted you, even for a moment. Olufemi held her tight. You have nothing to apologize for. I should have found a way to create this without all the secrecy. As they stood together in the office that represented a new chapter in their shared vision, Adana silently thanked her ancestors for guiding her to this man who honored her heritage and family with such thoughtfulness. The journey of the past 2 days, from suspicion to understanding, from fear to gratitude, had ultimately strengthened her appreciation for the depth of Olufemi's love. And as Chinya discreetly left them alone, closing the door behind her, Adana made a mental note to personally mentor this promising young woman who had helped make Olufemi's vision a reality. The foundation would not only honor her father's legacy but would create new connections between generations of Black African scholars committed to community development and educational excellence. "Show me everything," Adana said, wiping away her tears and straightening her shoulders. "And then let's talk about how we can make this foundation even stronger together." That evening, Adana and Olufemi sat on their veranda, the warm Ghanaian night enveloping them as they sipped palm wine and processed the day's revelations. The cicada's rhythmic chirping provided a soothing backdrop to their conversation. "I still can't believe you managed to keep this secret for so long," Adana said, her dark eyes reflecting the soft outdoor lighting. "You've never been good at hiding surprises from me." Olufemi chuckled, the sound deep and familiar. "It wasn't easy. There were moments I almost told you everything, especially when you'd call from your business trips sounding exhausted. I wanted to give you something to look forward to." Adana placed her glass on the side table, turning to fully face her husband. Her expression grew serious. "I need to confess something. When I came home yesterday and saw you with Chinyu, She hesitated, shame washing over her. "I assumed the worst." Olufemi's brow furrowed. "The worst?" "That there might be something inappropriate between you two," she admitted, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. "The way you were standing so close, the intimate conversation, I jumped to conclusions without context." Understanding dawned on Olufemi's face, followed by hurt. "You thought I was having an affair? With a student?" "I know how it sounds," Adana said quickly. "I didn't want to believe it, but seeing you together, hearing how she spoke about me as if she knew me intimately through your stories, it triggered insecurities I didn't even know I had." Olufemi set his glass down with deliberate care. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the night sounds of Accra. 8 years of marriage," he finally said, his voice quiet but steady, "and you could believe that of me so easily?" "Not easily," Adana countered, reaching for his hand. "It tore me apart. That's why I checked into a hotel instead of confronting you immediately. I needed time to think, to gather more information." "You investigated me," Olufemi stated flatly. "It wasn't a question." Adana nodded, feeling the weight of her actions. "I followed you this morning, which led me to the foundation office. Before that, I went to campus yesterday after seeing you and Chinyu. I overheard her student group discussing the scholarship launch." Olufemi withdrew his hand, standing to pace the length of the veranda. His tall frame was silhouetted against the garden lights as he processed this information. "I understand why you might have initially misinterpreted what you saw," he said carefully. "But to investigate me like a suspicious character in one of your crime novels rather than simply asking me directly, that suggests a fundamental lack of trust." The truth of his words stung. Adana rose as well, moving to stand beside him at the veranda railing. Below them, their garden lay in peaceful darkness, the flowers they'd planted together mere shadows in the night. "You're right," she acknowledged. "I should have trusted what 8 years of marriage has shown me about your character. I should have asked you directly. Why didn't you?" His question held genuine curiosity beneath the hurt. Adana considered this, searching herself for honest answers. "Perhaps I've spent too many years in corporate boardrooms where people hide their true intentions. Or perhaps..." She paused, recognizing a deeper truth. "Perhaps I was afraid of losing what we have. It was easier to investigate from a distance than to face the possibility that our marriage might be changing." Olufemi turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Our marriage is always changing, Adana. That's what keeps it alive. But the foundation, our commitment to each other, to honesty, that shouldn't change. I know that now, she said quietly. And I'm truly sorry. He studied her face in the dim light, then sighed. I'm not without fault in this. The secrecy, the private meetings with Chinyu and other students in our home, the unexplained financial transfers, I created a situation that could be misinterpreted. I was so focused on making the surprise perfect that I didn't consider how my behavior might appear. Adana felt a weight lifting. Where do we go from here? Olufemi reached for her hand, his touch tentative but warm. Forward, together. With a renewed commitment to communication. He guided her back to their seats. There's still more I need to tell you about the foundation. Things I was saving for the ceremony, but perhaps you should know now. For the next hour, Olufemi shared the full vision for the Samuel Okafor Scholarship Fund. How it would start with 5 students but expand each year. How he'd been working with educational NGOs across West Africa to create internship opportunities for the scholars. How he planned to incorporate Adana's expertise in finance to establish an endowment that would sustain the foundation for generations. This isn't just about honoring your father, he explained, passion illuminating his features. It's about creating the kind of legacy we've always talked about having. Since we haven't been blessed with children yet, this foundation can be another way we leave our mark, supporting young Black African scholars who might otherwise never have the opportunities you and I enjoyed. Adana felt tears welling. The foundation was indeed the perfect gift, one that spoke to their shared values and vision for the future. That Olufemi had conceived it and brought it this far on his own humbled her. I want to be fully involved going forward, she said. Not just as the daughter of the man we're honoring, but as an equal partner in building this legacy. I wouldn't have it any other way, Olufemi agreed. The surprise element was only for the launch. After that, I always envisioned us working together on this. As the night deepened around them, Adana leaned against her husband's shoulder, gratitude replacing the confusion and suspicion that had clouded the past 2 days. There is one more thing, Olufemi said hesitantly. Something I discovered while researching your father's early life for the foundation materials. What is it? Adana asked, curious about his sudden change in tone. Your father didn't just put himself through university as he always claimed, Olufemi explained. He had help, from a mentor who saw his potential and provided financial support when your grandfather fell ill. Your father kept this quiet all these years, perhaps out of pride. Adana sat up straight. Who was this mentor? Chief Mensah's father, Olufemi revealed. That's why the chief has been so supportive of our foundation. He's continuing a legacy his own father began almost 50 years ago with your father. The revelation struck Adana deeply. Her father, the proud, self-made man she had always emulated, had also needed help along his journey. This hidden chapter in his story didn't diminish his accomplishments but rather highlighted the importance of community support in educational advancement, exactly what their foundation aimed to provide. So our work is completing a circle that began generations ago, she said wonderingly. Olufemi nodded. Your father planned to tell you himself at the ceremony. He wants to publicly acknowledge Chief Mensah's father's role in his success. As they sat together under the Ghanaian stars, the full beauty of what Olufemi had created became clear to Adana. It wasn't just a scholarship fund or even a tribute to her father. It was a recognition of the interconnectedness of their lives, past, present, and future, and the power of education to strengthen those connections across generations. Thank you, she whispered, leaning in to kiss him. For seeing beyond what I could see. For building something that honors not just my father, but the values that brought us together. As their lips met, Adana felt the last remnants of suspicion dissolve, replaced by a deeper appreciation for the man she had married, a man whose capacity for thoughtfulness and vision continued to surprise and humble her, even after 8 years together. "Happy early anniversary," Olufemi murmured against her lips. And in that moment, surrounded by the night sounds of their adopted Ghanaian home, Adana knew that what they had built together was stronger than any momentary misunderstanding. Like the ancient baobab trees that dotted the West African landscape, their marriage had deep roots that could weather any storm, and would continue to provide shelter and support to others for generations to come. The grand ballroom of the Kempinski Hotel Gold Coast City glowed with purple and gold decorations, colors representing royalty in many West African traditions. Banner-sized photographs of Samuel Okafor's journey from a small Nigerian village to successful businessman lined the walls, telling the story of educational perseverance that inspired the foundation. Adana stood near the entrance in a golden Kent cloth gown, her hair adorned with traditional beaded accessories. Her eyes frequently found Olufemi across the room, deep in conversation with her father. "He's so proud," whispered her mother, Nkechi, elegant in deep blue traditional attire. "Of Papa or Olufemi?" Adana asked, embracing her. "Both. But mostly of you, my daughter. Your father always knew you would carry our family name to new heights." Adana felt emotion tighten her throat. "Everything I am began with the foundation he laid." Across the room, Olufemi motioned for her to join them. As she approached, her father opened his arms. "There she is," Samuel said, "the inspiration for all of this." "That title belongs to you, Papa," she replied, kissing his cheek. "We each stand on the shoulders of those who came before us," he responded. "Tonight, I will acknowledge publicly that my educational journey was not achieved alone." Chief Mensa joined them, resplendent in traditional Kent. "The circle completes itself tonight. Our fathers began this journey of educational empowerment, and now our children continue it." A chime announced the formal program. Olufemi squeezed Adana's hand before moving to the podium. "Distinguished guests," he began, "we gather to celebrate the Samuel Okafor Scholarship Fund for Young African Scholars, an initiative born from the profound impact one man's educational journey has had on countless lives, including my own." As Olufemi spoke, Adana observed the scholarship recipients. Chinyu sat among them, her posture reflecting understanding of the responsibility that came with such an opportunity. When their eyes met, Adana smiled warmly, all earlier misgivings replaced by appreciation. The program continued with speeches and testimonials. When Samuel Okafor rose to speak, a respectful hush fell. "For many years," he began, "I have told a story about my education that was incomplete. I spoke of determination and hard work, which were indeed essential, but omitted the crucial role played by a mentor who believed in me when circumstances grew difficult." As her father acknowledged Chief Mensa's father's support, Adana glanced at Olufemi, who watched her with such love that the last tension from their confrontation dissolved completely. After the foundation documents were signed and scholarships presented, Olufemi led Adana to a quiet corner. "Happy anniversary," he said, presenting a small velvet box. Inside lay a pendant of African gold, designed to represent the Adinkra symbol of wisdom, the same symbol they'd chosen for the foundation's logo. "A reminder of what we value and what we're building together," Olufemi said as he fastened it around her neck. "Both the foundation and our marriage require honesty, trust, and shared purpose. The past few days reminded me how precious what we have truly is," Adana replied, touching the pendant. As they danced, surrounded by family and the young scholars representing their shared vision, Adana reflected on their journey, not just the recent emotional turbulence, but the 8 years of partnership that had built a foundation strong enough to weather such misunderstandings. "Do you remember what you said when you proposed?" she asked. He smiled. "I said together, we could build something more beautiful and lasting than either of us could create alone." "You were right," she replied, gesturing toward the celebration, the manifestation of their shared values. Later, dancing with her father and the scholarship recipients, a symbolic passing of opportunity between generations, Adana felt a sense of completeness. What Olufemi had created, and what they would continue building together, was a legacy honoring the past while creating possibilities for the future. As the night ended, Adana stood between her husband and father, their hands linked in representation of the continuity the foundation embodied. The surprise that had begun with confused suspicions had blossomed into deeper understanding of the man she'd married and their shared purpose. To many more years of building together, Olufemi whispered. Many more, Adana agreed, moving in perfect synchrony under the glittering lights, surrounded by the future they were helping to create, a legacy of education and opportunity for generations of young Black African scholars to come.